every organization is concerned with increasing sales. How do you increase the average transaction? How do you find your ideal buyer? But more importantly, how do you elevate and lead a sales team? Well, that's the topic of today's session.
Welcome to Fordify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
All right. Well, no one better to help me discuss this topic than my friend and colleague, strategic partner, Jim Pancero. For those of you listening to the podcast, you can go to Pancero, Pancero.com or advancedsalesuniversity.com. Jim, thanks. Welcome to Fordify Live. We are live on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. And thanks for being here. I always want to increase sales. I'm going to take copious notes. Tell me, what are the challenges that you see with organizations today as it relates to sales and sales leadership and sales management?
Well, selling is changing dramatically. But what's been fascinating is I've been a professional sales trainer and consultant for 40 years. And for 40 years, it's been changing dramatically. About every 5 to 10 years, what used to work to give you a competitive advantage becomes generic to everybody. So there has to be a next threshold that you move to. So it's a constantly challenging and changing thing. In the 1960s, success was based on giving demos. The 70s was based on high pressure selling. The 80s was based on relationship selling because of the high pressure didn't work. So they went to relationship selling. Then in the 90s, because relationship selling wasn't working to give you a competitive advantage anymore, we went to consultative selling. Then it went to negotiated partnerships. Then it went to the Amazon model of speed, simplicity, and ease of use. And today now it's based on connectivity and communications with the customer, not just having a sales call, but how are you electronically connected? So as this is happening, all this is going on at the same time. Every year there's more numbers that have to be produced by the same salespeople. They need more profits, so they have to generate more gross sales. So because of all this, of having higher volumes needed, customers being more difficult to get to since post-COVID, and all these changes in what gives you a competitive edge, that today the sales leader has become a critical component to actually coach and lead the salespeople through this. We just can't have the old style of fake it till you make it. The average sales team is just a bunch of independent gunfighters. Each one's doing their own thing, their own way. They each even sell different products within the product line of the company because of what they like. Now, 10 years ago, as long as they were making money, company left them alone. Today, can't afford that. The volumes and expectations are just too high. So it's become more of the science of the structures and the processes to make successful salespeople even more successful. And that comes down to what the sales leader does.
You know, it's so true. I mean, when I look at my organizations, and I've had 17 different companies, my largest company had 140 employees. And, you know, sales is always something that comes up. I mean, I'm more seen on the marketing side. Yes, I do sales training like you do, but what you just described for each decade is so important. And how do you pivot? How do you remain relevant and the processes? And then you've got the different generations in the marketplace. Buyer behaviors have changed. There's increased competition. There's government regulations. There's supply chain issues. There's, you know, increased costs, the dynamics of everything. And so for those of you listening, again, we're live, but this also is the Business Growth Podcast. What I would say is, wherever you are in your business, ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, are you selling at a 10? And if not, why not? What do you see are some of the reasons, Jim? We know they have to increase more. They know they have to do more with less. We know they have to wear many hats, and they know they need to create a culture. But let's break it down to a business owner, maybe a franchise owner, or someone who needs to get more sales. And we're not talking about inbound and outbound marketing, digital now, guys. We're talking about face-to-face, toe-to-toe, ear-to-ear, or eye-to-eye, where you're doing, you know, you're selling. Where should someone start at understanding where the problems are? Like, because I think there's a perceived problem, and then there's the real problem.
What's happened, the biggest problem that managers have, and let's first talk about the managers and the salespeople. The biggest challenge sales managers have today is most have the assumption that experienced equals trained.
Yeah.
So that if they have a sales rep that's been selling 6 years and is making money for them, their assumption is they don't need any help. There's nothing else that needs to be done, just support them. So in the past, the average sales manager, because everybody was doing it different anyway, that independent gunfighter situation, all the manager did was be reactive in their support. My door is always open. Call me when you need me. And all the manager did was really focus on special pricing, expediting, problem solving, and customer thank you calls. So this change that's happening is we need the sales manager now to be more proactive and more of a leader, more future focused, not just history and today, to be able to make this turn. Because what used to work and gave you a competitive advantage is just assumed today.
Right.
I'm amazed. I'll sit on an airplane, as you fly a lot of planes
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
I fly a lot of planes. And if I'm especially upgraded to first class, I know there's an 80% chance the person sitting next to me is in sales or sales leadership because of the frequent flyer programs.
Yep.
And so it's prospecting for me. So I'll turn to the person next to me and say, what do you do? And they say they're in sales or sales leadership. And I go, what a surprise. And I interview them.
Right.
And it's a great prospecting opportunity. I've gotten a lot of business because they liked what I was saying. And one of the things when I see a salesperson, the first question I ask him is, what is your competitive edge? Why are you successful today? And the most common, 90% of the time, the answer is relationships. And I'm thinking, wait, that's not a competitive advantage anymore. If you're working with a customer, they're going to have a relationship with you, and they'll even keep relationships with prospects or other vendors just as backup in case you fall through. But it's given. It's not a competitive edge. So we have a lot of people saying how unique they are in a very generic way. So the customer then buys based on price because they were given no other options to select from.
Thanks.
One of the major messages I talk about in all of my programs is that I have not yet found a price-driven market, and I'm working in base materials. I joke and say I'm really big in the HGD market. HGD stands for heavy, greasy, or dirty. That pretty much defines my customers. So there's a lot of what people consider commodities, and
Right.
none of those markets are price-driven.
Right.
They're value-driven. If the customer sees no difference in value, then they buy based on price. But price is the default position when there's an absence of value differential. The job of a sales rep is to communicate that differential. The problem is most salespeople are weak in their messaging. An amazing question is to ask a salesperson, okay, you're the third vendor I've talked to this week. Why, based on all the competitive options available to me, do I want to buy from you? And the standard answer from a salesperson is, well, because of our high quality products, our strong level of support,
Right.
our competitive price. We're not the cheapest, but we're competitive. And you get me. And that's it. And the customer then hears that from 3 different vendors and then chooses the cheapest one because there was nothing else talked about. The second is most salespeople have not been trained today. This can sound kind of funny, but they've not been trained on how to sell. They've been trained on products. They've been trained on technical information. They've been trained on how to enter their computer system. But most of them have not been trained to sell. You ask a salesperson, okay, you've been selling for us for 3 years. Write down the steps of a sales call. What do you do? And 90% of salespeople either can't write it down or the stuff they write down was obsoleted decades ago as being inefficient and ineffective. So they don't even have the structure to get through a sales call. It's like trying to be a professional golfer, but you really don't know the steps of a golf swing. I doubt if we're going to make a lot of money on the circuit. So it's this combination of these salespeople having gaps in the actual skills of selling, the processes of selling, not the products or technical, combined with the managers not really coaching or leading them in a more future-focused way. And you find that there's a lot of sales organizations that aren't selling as much as they'd like to or that they could.
And they say, a lot of them, Jim, will say, well, they've got some sales. I'm working with an aerospace company here in town. They might be listening, so I have to be careful what I say hypothetically here.
Great company.
Yeah, great company. But one of the things that the challenge that they have is that their salespeople have been there for 10 years. And, and I said to the CEO, I said, do they have 10 years experience or 1 year they've repeated 10 times? And because it's so true, they're just stuck in their own ways. They're servicing their key accounts. They're not really building relationships. And there's organizations that get turnover. And what happens is, and you and I have seen this in our business, we've had, ongoing consulting clients and the business is good. They're on a retainer. And then all of a sudden, if you haven't built a really strong relationship deeper in the organization, they call you one day and say, oh, well, we're not renewing your contract. And you're like, well, was it a performance issue? Was it? And well, no, it's John is the new marketing director now. And the marketing director wants to come in and use his vendors, or they want to just change what they're doing. And because if I don't have a relationship deeper in that organization, then you lose the business, not because you weren't the best, not because you didn't do it, but because someone wants to make a change just because. And so what organizations need to really look at is their existing, how do you retain your current clients and build those strong relationships? But also, like you said, more importantly, it's a really good note to take down for everybody, was thinking ahead, future casting, and looking at how can you be a prime resource professional? How can you be so strategic that you're tied to the hip with the company in a good way, because they're turning to you for value and to solve problems. So I don't know. I'd love to have you speak to that, because I'm listening to this. I'm like, this is an interview. I don't really need an interview. I just want to invite all my team members in here and say, hey, because I believe that everybody's in sales, regardless of their role, like whether they have a sales title or not. They're in the ability to, or that's part of the customer experience. It's part of the touch point. So when I first work with a company, I map out the customer journey, make a list of all their touch points, electronic and otherwise, and at what stage does it go to that personal side? And the problem I've seen, Jim, is salespeople sell from their unique perspective and not necessarily the clients.
I think there's two. You've summarized really great what I see the challenges in a lot of sales organizations are today. We have to separate selling from persuasion. Yes. Because anybody that interacts with a customer needs to be persuasive, nice, pleasant, how they handle it, proactive, and even what they ask. But we're in a support position. Is there bells going off?
Yeah, that's good. I rang it.
Anyway, they're in a support position. So the sales position is a proactive leadership position of the persuasive delivery to the customer. So that position needs to be more proactive, more structured. The problem is most salespeople are intuitive. Why'd you go into sales? When you ask people in high school, why'd you go into sales? And it usually was because they were the most obnoxious person and they were the loudest. So they figured you must be persuasive. We'll put you in sales. So they got into sales and they stumbled around and they had some success. And after a few years, they built up a territory, but they're not really sure what they're doing. The average sales rep is like the Hilary bird. Ever hear of the Hilary bird?
Yeah, tell the story. I know it, but tell it.
Yeah, it's a 3-foot bird, lives in 4-foot grass, spends its whole life saying, where the hell are we? So the average sales rep functions on next best move. If you ask a salesperson, who's your most important account? And they say the Johnson account. And then you say they say, okay, so what do you have planned for them? And they usually can tell you exactly what they're going to do on the next sales call. But then when you say, and then what are you going to do? The most common answer here is, it depends. An interesting test for anybody listening that's a manager is just draw a horizontal arrow where the arrowhead is pointing this direction like that. And on one end of the line, put identify, and right before the arrow, put the word close to define what is one process of selling, even though the relationship is going to continue. That's what the arrow represents. And I'll draw that sketch out and hand it to a salesperson and say, you've been selling for this company for 5 years. Walk me through your steps. What do you do? And the average answer I hear is, it depends, because they have no structure. It hasn't been defined. Go to 3 different salespeople in the same company individually and ask them, I just got this asked by a customer, what would you have said? And the customer said, look, you're the 3rd vendor I've talked to this week. Why, based on all the competitive options available to me, do I want to buy from you? And you'll hear that all 3 will have completely different answers. And they won't be very unique. They'll be generic. It's this lack of structure and lack of process. And because of that, relationships are going to suffer if you're not doing the processes right. Right. Customers today don't want a friend. They want a connection that's going to make their life easier, that's going to lower their risk, that's going to help them make more money, or it's going to increase their competitive advantage. Those are the 4 fundamental reasons of buying. And if we look at it, how are you going to help me lower my risk more than anybody else? How are you going to help make my life or work easier in your services than anybody else? How are you going to lower my total cost? You could be a higher price, but still have an overall lower total cost experience. And how can you actually increase my edge as I go after my business growth? And so the reality is that we talk about needing a relationship, but really it says we have to connect with value. It's not the personality of the salesperson the customer is excited about. It's the resources and the tools and the information that the sales rep can bring. So we need today to be more proactive. One of the things that's happened since COVID is customers just don't have time today for chit chat.
Right.
It used to be you could just go out to a customer and sit there for a half hour just to visit and talk about vacations to build the relationship. Customers today will throw you out if you do that. They don't want you to be their friend. They want you to be their support structure. And I think a lot of salespeople are still confusing that, thinking, oh, they got to be my buddy. This was the old 1970s, but customers just go, I don't have time for that. It's not current. Customers don't want to go to lunch with you or go to dinner. They want to have you meet in the office and get the job done. And then so they can get on to have dinner with their friends or have lunch with their friends. So it's almost like the whole process of what it takes to be successful has changed. We need salespeople thinking more moves ahead. We need salespeople having stronger messaging and positioning that in 1 minute they can say why they're unique and focus on the customer with that uniqueness.
So let's give them some. Let's give them some practical steps. So we know that they need to do it. We know what they might be doing wrong. For those people that are in sales, what are 3 steps they could take? Now, for the record, everybody, this isn't scripted. Jim has no idea what I'm asking him. This is me just having a conversation with a smart person. But what someone who is in sales right now or runs a business and they want to increase their sales in the next day, week, or month, what are 3 things that they should do to effectively improve their sales? I have a couple of answers, but I'd like to ask you first.
First thing that they need to do is make sure they understand how the structure of selling works.
Okay, so one, they need to have a structure. They need to really map out and have a sales playbook, right? They need to understand.
That's different. A playbook is kind of where it's a multiple step process of how we win the business, which is important.
So they needed a sales process to understand in their business. What's the process?
Yeah, but that's different. What I'm talking
I'm asking you. I'm asking to clarify. I'm trying to get it clarified. Yeah. So what's number one? Sorry, I interrupted. I'm going to start over. We're not editing this out. This is live, everybody. Tell us number 1, Jim.
Take 2.
Yeah, we're good.
The first piece is operational. You need to know the steps of a sales call. You also need to know process of plan, but separate from that, what are the steps to get through a sales call?
Got it.
Because the average sales rep doesn't know those steps or doesn't follow them. By the way, there's just 5 simple steps. First, you lower resistance. Then you ask questions to learn and qualify. Then you present your solutions. Then you have some kind of closure. And then you agree and set up your next contact to continue the relationship. The problem is most salespeople back end it and do all the time presenting and talking. They do very little questioning. They don't follow the steps to be able to make it more persuasive. So their calls come across as ineffective. The second thing they need to do is to think more moves ahead. Don't be a Larry bird. It isn't just we're going in for our first call with a customer and hoping to get a plant tour. What else do you want to accomplish? How are we going to get our message across? Who else can you meet besides your contact? What can you see about competitive products when you get a tour? We have to do more than just the reactive show up and suck up, which is what most salespeople are doing. I think those 2 pieces. The third piece is to talk to either salespeople that are more successful than you or to a manager that will be your coach to help figure out where are your skills of selling and how can they be improved to be able to make you more consistent. If you're a professional golfer and not doing well in the golf circuit and you go and take a week off, those people go to their swing coach. They don't talk about how to play the course. They talk about the consistency of being able to hit the ball. And it's fascinating how over my 40-year career, I started teaching steps of a sales call. Then I got for 30 years into advanced selling. But because of the generational changes and the new people coming in, I'm back to just doing a tremendous amount of steps of a sales call, steps of the sales
because it's
process.
a lost art. People don't in the organizations haven't been trained, and at the speed of change and the way people are coming into the workforce, they're not using these new skills, right?
Experience equals trained. That's the problem.
So I know that one of the action steps people should do is definitely do what are the top 7 to 10 traits or skill sets that you need in your position, and then score them on a scale of 1 to 10 to identify where the gaps are. There's all kinds of sales assessments. Jim sells them. I sell them on ProfitRichResults.com. But you need to assess your team and really think about how you're going to reinvigorate your sales. And then also, work with, do you have hunters or farmers? I mean, do you have people that are going to go out there and get the sale, and do you have people that are going to nurture the sale? And I think to be successful in sales, I'm going to more ask this question. Don't you think you need to be both a hunter and a farmer?
I see very few successful companies that have separated those two as 2 independent forces.
Right.
Because frankly, the new business sales prospecting can either come from finding a brand new company or finding a new application within an existing company. Both of those are fair definitions. So when we have what people refer to as a farmer, somebody assigned a territory and maintaining it, they still have as much responsibility to grow the sales of that existing customer as somebody that's prospecting. In fact, usually the growing side of the business has a larger quota than does the prospecting side, because
Yep.
prospecting takes more work. But both sides are in charge of selling. They're in charge of growing the business. They're in charge of getting higher, wider, and deeper within their accounts to have more connectivity, to just doing something different. Problem is, the average sales rep with an existing customer, every sales call, they keep asking the same 4 questions. Anything you need? Anything coming up? Anything I can help with? How's the family? And it's this reactive support mentality instead of proactively growing and bringing solutions. Customers don't have the loyalty with the sales reps that they used to.
Right. They don't have brand loyalty or salespeople loyalty anymore.
So because of that, you have to be proactively improving things and constantly bringing them solutions, or you'll be replaced even if you have the best product in the market.
Yeah, and you'll be replaced just because the business can't sustain itself if you're not generating new business. Well, Jim, I really appreciate you being on the show today. This has been Jim Pancero. We go live, everybody, Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and now on other platforms too. And again, this is also the Business Growth Podcast, so if you're listening on audio. So this is Jim Pancero. I'm going to say his websites again. It will be in the show notes also, but it's Pancero, and also Advanced Sales University. He is the master at helping heavy, greasy, dirty companies. I know years ago, we both worked with John Deere and some other big brands, but you can check him out at pancero.com. Jim, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and knowledge. I will definitely have you back. I know we're going to have comments below, and we'll answer them live on other episodes in the future, but also comment while you were here. Thanks again, Jim. Really appreciate it.
It's been an honor being interviewed.